Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess if you're new here, and today I'm in a very different spot. So if you hear some weird noises, things like that, it's because I'm in my garage. I actually have been meaning to show you guys my garage, so let me show you really quick. Basically, my roommate and I switched sides, so if you've seen past art videos, I used to work on that bench there. But she actually built that bench, so she wanted to keep it. So we have switched sides. So now this is my side. Those are not my pieces, but they're there because we don't have anywhere else to put them. And I have a lot of cleaning up to do in here, and I plan on doing a full video on that. But I have to first, I found this couch and I need to figure out how to put it together because I have no hardware for it. So that's one of my plans to do this weekend. It'll make sense in a future video, but regardless, today I thought that I would talk about something that I have not really talked about a whole lot on this channel before, and that was my experience in art school and college in general. So I believe I have made a video titled like things that you should know before you go to art school, something like that, but I'll go into like some more of the like story time elements here. When I first started watching YouTube in general, I actually watched it primarily because of story times, and I found them very, very interesting. And I remember this specific incident happening, or these incidents happening at the time, and just thinking like, man, I would love to like tell someone these stories. And move that out of the background, that was really ugly. And just like, I don't know, get a chance to talk about it because it was always so interesting to me. We're so crazy, and I know story times are not as popular nowadays, but I still find this story very interesting, and I thought I would just tell it today and take some time to just chat. Okay, so just to go into it a little bit briefly first, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. So I moved to Seattle sort of on a whim. I had been applying to places. I actually accepted a spot, I guess you could say, at UCI, so a school in Irvine. I was from San Diego, and so Irvine was very practical. I had a friend that was going there, so I'd already know somebody. But my sister had been studying computer science at the time, and she had created her own company, and I was working there, and UW was one of the best CS schools, and that's what I was so like gung-ho about at the time. I felt like I really wanted to do computer science, so I figured UW would be a better option. And I actually applied there very last minute, but I got in, and so on a whim I decided that I was gonna go. And I still have a video of this somewhere, basically me just like accepting my offer to UW. So fast forward, I am going for my I'm going for my computer science classes, and it's actually quite interesting because the spring of my freshman year, I had met a friend, and I was explaining to him all about my computer science class and whatnot, and he totally fell in love with it, and he actually ended up majoring in computer science, and now he is a dev. I don't want to say what company, but I just find it so interesting that sometimes these small influences can really impact what you end up doing in your life. So I had taken this, it was called a sculpture class, and I took it because they said, a lot of my friends had said that you should really take your spring quarter very easy at UW. The reason being is that like all year it's pretty like gloomy or rainy, and for spring it's so beautiful out that all you want to do is be outside. So if you're loading your schedule with tons of classes that are really difficult, then you're just not really gonna have a hard time. And of course that's not possible for everyone. So for myself, again, I did have to take my computer science class in the springtime because that was the only time it was offered that year. But for like, I also took art so that I could like have a slightly easier load. So this art class really inspired me a lot. I really loved it, and my professor at the time was not actually a professor, he was actually a grad student. And so the way that my school worked is that grad students would also teach some of the intro classes. So his name was Tim, and he was just such a cool person. He really I don't know, like got me into a lot of the things that I felt like I wanted to try to pursue, but I wasn't sure how to do. So I had worked or done ceramic classes for 2 years in high school as well. So I already was familiar with a lot of that kind of stuff. But Tim, my professor, would take me to like different art shows and art events and things like that, and I really just fell in love with it. So the following year, I actually talked with the ceramic professor that spring and told him that I wanted to try to get into the ceramic class, but the classes are really difficult to get into because they only allow like 15 people into the classes, where like architecture could handle like 450. So when you have such a big school, it's hard to get into. And he told me, just like, even if you can't get in, just show up on the first day and I'll get you into the class. So that next year, I actually did not get myself into the class, but a few people didn't show up to class, so I was able to make it in. And so I was super excited. This guy his name was Doug, and he was an amazing, amazing professor. Like, I really loved what he had to say. I really loved his art style. I really looked up to Doug so much, and I wanted to impress him. I wanted to work alongside him. I wanted him to be my mentor, and he was the ceramic professor. So the major that I ended up going through or switching to was called three-dimensional form, or 3D4M, and you had to apply to it, you had to be accepted, everything. So I went through that whole process and I was accepted. I believe my spring quarter of my sophomore year, I was officially accepted. So I had to have a full portfolio and everything. And what 3D4M comprised of was ceramic, metal, woodwork, and glass. So, and overall it was sculpture. It was supposed to be 3D everything. So you could also do like performance art, things like that. So I did oftentimes opt for performance art, and I never really touched glass ever. I was always a little bit intimidated by it, but ceramics was my forte, I guess you could say. So now, fast forwarding to that spring when I did get into class or into the major, I had met a lot of my really close friends through that. I met my friend Zach, who is still one of my best friends. I don't talk to him all that often anymore because he still lives in Washington and I'm living in LA, but definitely one of my best friends, and also my friend Miriam. So we were just like the three musketeers, and it was just so much fun. Like, we absolutely like loved it, killed it. We would hold critiques with one another, everything. I had wanted to apply to study abroad, and my professor at the time, Doug, I had just made this, like, it was my first quarter taking all art classes, so three art classes plus an art history class, and the art classes were pretty difficult in the sense that, like, at least in my major, where you would go through about a 3-hour lecture, but you were expected to do about 40 hours per week per class. Myself, I had to work while I was in school because I wasn't rich and I had student loans. So I also had to keep a job, and I also had this art history class, and also I was a human and I wanted to have like relationship, things like that. So I was struggling a little bit. And that quarter, my piece, I took a life-size sculpture class for ceramics, and my piece was a person standing, and one night it fell, and it was nobody's fault. It just was, I don't know, maybe I just didn't build it right. I wasn't there when it fell, and I came into the studio with a note on this like pile of stuff that just said, "I tried to save it, I'm sorry." And I think I still have that note because it just like hurt so much. I tried to like work with what I had in terms of, yeah, the pieces, but it was not my best work. It was not something that I was necessarily proud of or excited about. I think I learned quickly that I never pushed, or in that time I hadn't been pushing myself far enough, really. So my professor was like I don't know, my critique was not great. Our critiques were supposed to last about an hour and a half. That's for finals week, you'd have critiques, and that's how much time was given for that class. But our critiques sometimes went into like 3 a.m. So you'd go like 6 p.m. all the way to 3 a.m. and it was brutal. Like, you would just be ripped to shreds and you'd be like almost in tears. And it was, and men and women, like, it didn't have to do with like I was more emotional or whatever. Like, that was just how my major was. And going into other art classes, so like eventually I took like a printmaking class and things like that, never like that. Like, everybody was pretty kind. They would still critique you in terms of like, oh, I wish you would have done this, but like never ripping you to shreds. So I went to my professor and I told him I really want to study abroad in Europe, in Rome specifically, and there's this program, but I need one of my professors to sign off on it or to like write me a letter of recommendation. And he was really like apprehensive about writing me my letter of rec, and he was like, I know that most of the time students come out of Rome and have much better perspective, so I'm gonna write you your letter of rec and hopefully your art improves. And I was a little offended, honestly, but I was also like, that's fine as long as I get a letter of rec. So I got into the program and I was really excited, and I met amazing friends through that. I had a great experience, and I actually stayed in Europe a little bit longer just to explore and take online classes and whatever, and it was just such a great time. And I came back, and the way that my major worked was there were 15 people total in the major at the time, and so it was very small. My building was actually off campus, so it was like down a hill from campus, if that makes sense. And the whole point was that like you do X amount of studio classes, and then in your 4th year you're supposed to get an art show. And it's called senior exhibition. And so we also, the quarter before your senior exhibition, you had to do a presentation on I can't remember what it was called now, but anyway, you had to do a presentation of like what inspires you, essentially. And it felt like what inspired me was not what inspired my professors, and so they were pretty rude about what inspired me, essentially. Like, I talked a little bit about Kurt Vonnegut, for example, and like even brought out like all of my favorite quotes and why, and explained everything, and they just really seemed to have an issue with it. So that went pretty poorly, and the following quarter was supposed to be my senior exhibition, and I had quite a few mental health struggles at the time. This was probably the time when I had my most problems in life. I personally was you know, just about to graduate art school. I wasn't really sure what my prospects were at that point, and I just felt like I wasn't sure about anything, and I had tons of student loan debt, and my mental health was just fully declining, and I fell into pretty deep depression, and it felt like it was really affecting a lot of my relationships. Unfortunately, my friendship with my friend Miriam kind of fell through the cracks a little bit, and it sucks. And there are a lot of other drama parts to that, things that I just didn't agree with that were happening. So yeah, a lot was happening at the time. And so for my senior exhibition, I wanted to, we had these like big spaces, and there were 2 big spaces, and you would share a show. So there were multiple shows in it, like each week there was a different show, and you would get one room, the other person would get the other room. So I wanted to build a room inside of one of those rooms, and I wanted to fill it with like, I don't know, like a bed and like a side table and like all of these different, like making it feel like a home, but like insert someone into this headspace that I was in, like not being able to put your own shoes on, not being able to get out of bed, like maybe like the mirror would be all scratched up, and you know, maybe you could like not really see through it or whatever it may be. And that's just an example. I don't remember, I had like a whole list of ideas of what I wanted to do. My friend the quarter before me, Zach, had also gotten his show taken away, and I can't remember, oh, I remember why. It was because he had some heart issues. He was going to the doctor and things like that, but sorry, there are fireworks above my ceiling. He was going to the doctor and whatnot, but he was still always present for class. He was always making it to class. I think one time he missed because of a doctor's appointment, but all of the other times he was there. So they claimed that he was not healthy enough to have an art show, and this really frustrated him because he knew that what the reality was that they had some sort of problem with him. And for him, he also was like, if I'm not healthy enough, then I should be the one to make that decision, and my doctor should be the one to make that decision, not you guys. So then that following quarter was my time to have my show, and they said that for my show that I had just talked about, they said that they weren't sure how to critique mental health, and so they would rather not talk about it. And that really upset me because there were so many people in my major that said that they think this would be a really cool idea, that they could really benefit from it. They think that a lot of people sort of being inserted into what depression might even feel or look like could be super, super beneficial, because people who don't experience it may not even know what it could remotely feel like. So people were pretty excited about it, and it felt like Zach and I were being sort of attacked. That quarter, him and I got together and we made our own show in another studio space that was at my school as well. So we definitely felt like we got back at them. There was another piece that I had made that got accepted into a juried show, which is somewhat difficult to get into. So I felt like it was just them really judging what my friend and I had to offer in terms of our art. And we sort of came to realize that a lot of times the professors, they had like their own style, and if you didn't match their style, then you weren't accepted as a student, which is really, really frustrating. And so going through this, I actually spoke often with my counselor, and we even had to escalate it all the way to the head of the art department about how we felt like we were being treated. Of course, that didn't mean that we got our shows, but again, we felt like already we had gotten back at them for that, or that we like got what we deserved essentially. And because I don't want to spend that in a negative way to be like, oh, we got back at them. Like, we just wanted to feel like we really got our fair chance at our shows. And the professors even had like really talked badly about the show that we had created at the other art place, the other like art studio space in the school, which like really just felt so childish. So speaking with my counselor throughout this whole process, she actually switched me majors to another art major that allowed me to graduate earlier because I had already completed all of my credits for that major. So I think it was technically interdisciplinary visual arts, so just like art in general, very generic degree. But I was happy to do that because it was feeling more and more toxic, and I realized I was inserting myself into this space of like, I have to make myself what they want me to be in order to be a good artist, and that's just not how art should work. I think that like you should always have a reason for something. You shouldn't do something in art just because it was easier or just because it happened that way. There's always time to perfect things, and sometimes art may look abstract or messy or whatever, but there should be a reason for that. It shouldn't just be just because that's how you like it or whatever. And I still learned so much throughout that whole process and throughout school, and I wouldn't change it regardless, because I did get my own studio space and I got a lot of knowledge out of that school. But for adults to be treating you know, people that are not even 21 this way just felt so ridiculous to me, and it just felt so childish and so much like they had to really prove something to themselves. Even with like me working, they were always talking about how I shouldn't be working while I was in school, and it was just like a really privileged thing to say for an art professor, because their job was to work on their art, where for me, I had to put myself through school. So it was just really frustrating, and I wanted to tell this story mostly because I still think, again, that I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot from the experience of like what it feels like to have these you know, adult figures, these people who are supposed to know more or who are supposed to be your leaders in one way or another, maybe someone that you looked up to, that they could just be bad people, or they could maybe not have your best interest, or that you are allowed to stand up to these people. I ended up with a really great art mentor who has done way more than any of these professors have done in the art world, especially in the Seattle area, and she is just an amazing woman, and I'm so thankful that like I got an internship through her. I got to really work with her on so many projects, and she has introduced me to so many people in the art industry that I felt like I really found my place finally. And so I just don't want anyone to give up just because someone says that they're not good enough. Prove why you're good enough. Like, don't just sit back and say like, yeah, maybe I'm not, but you know, let them walk all over you. Just show people that other people will accept your art, or that other people will accept your work in general, whether it be at work or in school and studying, in I don't know, making your own practice for something. Like, it could really be for anything, but I just don't want anyone to think like, oh, maybe I'm just not good enough because this person says I'm not. Yeah, and that's really why I wanted to tell this story. It's something that I've learned so much from, and I hope that you guys can learn a little bit from it too. I'm sorry this was a little long, but I think you needed to know some of the beginning parts of where I was coming from mentally and like in life in general, in order to understand how I ended up where I was in that situation. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for Tuesday. As always, true crime is on Tuesday, and I have a really interesting video this Tuesday as well. I'm really glad you guys enjoyed the last one. It seems like quite a few people had not heard that case before, so I'm glad that I was able to tell it to you guys. And definitely, again, stay tuned for Tuesday, and then the following week is Halloween. I'm so excited. All right, have a great Saturday, guys. Bye.